What is up, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Today we are checking out my signature tilt overdrive pedal by REVV Amplification. This is kind of weird. Like, wow, I mean, what guitar player doesn't dream about being able to sit down with somebody who knows how to build things and say, this is the sound in my head, do you think you might be able to get it? Well, that's basically over about a year process what has happened between myself and a guy named Dan Trudeau, who is the chief designer for REVV Amplification. So what is this thing? Well, it's an overdrive pedal with a boost circuit that has a really cool kind of tilty Q and some tweaks on it. We'll get into that in a second. The drive side is kind of a medium gain, overdrive. The pedal's based on, honestly, just a sound that was in my head. It's kind of an amalgamation of a lot of just single channel tube amps that I've played over the years, or had opportunity to play. So everything from a little Tweed Champ all the way up to maybe a high powered, like, Tweed Twin, up to maybe a Marshall Plexi, or maybe it was a JTM or a JCM. I just tried to cram all of those into one overdrive pedal as best I could. I needed it to be crazy expressive like an amp would be, but definitely not an amp in a box. I don't see this pedal as that. So yeah, you know what, let's just get right into it. On the drive side of the pedal, it's got volume, gain, treble, and bass. We'll get into how all those sound when I demo it, which is really weird. I'm demoing my own pedal. And on the boost side, now the boost is basically into the drive side of the pedal. On the boost side, you get 12 dB of crazy clean boost with what I'm calling the tilt EQ. Now, this is not meant to be crazy active as an EQ, but also this boost is not meant to be transparent. I'll show you in the demo how you can get kind of close to a transparent boost type of thing, but the reason the tilt EQ is there is I've just always noticed with really great sounding single knob boost pedals, as you really start cranking it, anomalies will start showing up either in the top end or the low end. So that's one of the reasons I put this style EQ on the pedal. Another reason is just simply for workflow. I want to be able to quickly sculpt in a tone, especially when I'm using this to drive the overdrive side of the pedal for more gain. I just want to be able to quickly dial things in. So as you turn it to the left, it's basically going to add highs and take away lows. If you turn it to the right, it's going to do just the opposite. And we'll get into how that sounds. It's a really, really useful feature. And below that is what I'm calling a tight switch. The only reason that's there is to just kind of shelve out low frequencies. So depending on where you have the tilt EQ set, you can keep it in the middle position, which would be normal. It's not cutting anything. But if your tone did get a little boomy, but you loved where you had that tilt EQ set, you could just throw the switch in two different directions. So the down is full. So that's the most amount of low end you could cut. Middle, as I mentioned, is neutral. And then up is basically half the amount of low end. And we'll get into how that sounds as well in the demo. Once again, it's just for me, this was a workflow feature that I really wanted on the pedal. Both switches on this pedal, obviously both sides can be used independently of each other, and of course together. They are soft switches or momentary switches. And the cool thing about that is I just prefer that anymore. I just like the way they feel. But we were also able to put a memory card in there. So if, say you want to turn on both sides at once, you can just hold down the drive side switch for like a second and a half. It'll turn both sides of the pedal on. And the other thing that's really cool too is if you want to have this thing power up with one side on and the other side off, or vice versa, you can do that quite easily with this pedal. It does run 9-volt power. It charge pumps up to 12 volts for the boost side, but I prefer staying at 9 volts on the drive side. So yeah, without further discussion, let's check out my Tilt Overdrive. Okay, so let's check this thing out. Here's just the guitar into the amp. And here is the drive side of the Tilt Overdrive. Okay, so that's kind of a starting point for me. You know, that's kind of how I dial it for the most part on the drive side, because the pedal's really expressive. So even with, you know, the kind of gain I was playing with, this isn't a ton of gain, but like a back position humbucker, this one's fairly hot. If I lighten way up, it'll really clean up like a, you know, a single channel amp would clean up. But if I dig back in, and it also stays really clear, like the single note clarity. But if I go to a neck position type of sound, and do the same thing, it'll really clean up. So it's just super dynamic and expressive. So while I've got it dialed this way, let's just go ahead and do the gain range. Let me just turn it down a bit. There's noon. Here's a little hotter where I kind of like to keep it. Now, even this is what I would consider a medium gain pedal, but it's capable of more than that. If you dime it, now in this case, without much gain, you can start backing the guitar off. And it'll clean up nicely, and then you can just roll it back up. So even without much gain, it's still pretty dynamic and responsive. Okay, so that's the gain range. I'll put it back to about there. Let's look at the treble. Here's the treble off. So this pedal's capable of getting really, really dark. And I wanted that type of range in the design. Here's the treble about halfway up. And then here's the treble all the way up. like it about there. It just depends on what amp you're using as far as how you dial it, but I wanted it to be a really usable range of treble. You know, so if you're plugged into an amp that you love having the bright switch on or whatever it might be, you've got enough range there that's usable to dial in your sound, you know? Okay, now the bass, the way I wanted this bass circuit to sound is not super like massive. I mean, all of us guitar players love all that low end, and it's great, and this pedal's capable of that, but I wanted it to be kind of a fatter, almost low mid type of bass, so I'll just shut it off. Off. And the pedal's still full sounding. Like, this is pretty much how I would dial it in a track. Because I know it'll fit. That's, you know, it's not taking up too much room. We turn the bass up to about here. Pretty big, but still tight. There's still some clarity there. It's like turning on a 4x12 cab. As you keep cranking the bass, it actually gets kind of fatter, not so subby. So, you know, if you wanted to take a solo, you'd have really fat single notes without it being tubby, because what happens is, you know, when you crank the bass like that on a lot of overdrive pedals, it doesn't really fatten up the single note. It just gives this kind of big enveloping low end, and I actually wanted it to fatten up single notes. If, you know, if that's desirable. Here's all the way up. And I like it, you know, about right here. Just depending on what I'm doing. Okay, so that's the drive side of the pedal. I'm going to leave it dialed like that. I'm going to turn on the boost side of the pedal with what I'm calling the more setting. So you've got this tone stack dialed and you're digging it, you just want more. This is kind of how I have it dialed. Now the drive, or I shouldn't say the drive side, the boost side of this pedal is not meant to be totally transparent. In other words, there's no like neutral, like, you know, detent that would be no cut or boost of frequencies. I didn't want it to sound like that. But there is, as you can see how I have it set right now, there is a way to get, you know, somewhat neutral. If you just want it to be more, that's how I would dial it. And I've, you know, we'll get into this switch. I employed that switch as well to kind of get just that more setting. But with the drive, let's just mess around. You know what? Let's check out this tight switch, because I'm set up in a way that I think will show you guys pretty clearly how it works. Here's the normal setting. The tight switch is all it's doing is it's just kind of shelving out some low frequencies. So if the pedal gets a little too boomy, depending on where you have the tilt EQ, you can kind of dial that out. So with it in the center, that's quite a bit more low end because of how I have the tilt EQ set. But if I want to just fix that really quickly, I can throw this switch in two different directions. If I want to cut a lot of that low end out, I can just throw the switch. Now it's tighter, it's bringing out some mids. It's not really bringing out mids. Mids are becoming more present because there isn't so much low end there. If I want to take out like half that amount, then I can do the switch up. And that's somewhere in between, a little bit less low end, not as much as if we were cutting, you know, full. So that's really why that's there, and it's going to respond slightly differently depending on where the tilt EQ itself is set. But for the most part, just look at it that way. It's a tight switch. It's going to cut low end depending on how you have it set. So I'm not going to turn up the boost at all right now. I think I'll leave this set where it is, and now I'll put it in the center. Okay. Let's check out what the tilt EQ actually does before we get into adding boost. Okay, so as you can hear, as you turn it to the right, it's gonna basically add lows and cut highs, and then it's gonna do the opposite as you turn it to the left. And I just really wanted that there so that I could basically quickly sculpt in a sound, whether, as I showed you, I needed it to be somewhat neutral and just more, or I needed it to be, you know, maybe I want to have more cut. So in this case, you know, let's say, you know, this is my tone stack, crunch tone. I want more, but it needs to be brighter. And what if I want that to have a little bit less lows? You know, let's go ahead and employ that tight switch. Go the other way. We can go even brighter. I can put the switch back to the center. So you can hear what I'm able to do with that just really quickly without touching my amplifier or my tone stack. I can just quickly dial something in between the tilt EQ and that tight switch. Okay, so now let's start messing with, you know, adding a little bit more boost to the tone. Let's leave this here. Maybe go that route. Now you can hear as I added more boost, it actually created some low end, even with this cut, and that's where the tilt EQ comes in as well, is I can just roll it slightly over to the left, which is going to cut some lows. So it's 12 dB of boost, so it's not like a ton of boost, but it's enough to achieve, you know, definitely a higher gain, kind of more pushed tone if you'd like. I mean, honestly, I keep it dialed pretty much, you know, maybe along these lines. So like I said, tone stack here, and then pushed. But if I'm on a session and like the producer's like, hey, I like that tone, but I just want it to have a little bit more kind of gnarl to it, or, you know, whatever they end up saying that makes no sense to me, but I think I know what they mean. They want that. Now it doesn't have enough low end. Okay, well, I can throw a switch. Now it's got more low end. So that is the Shawn Tubbs Signature Tilt Overdrive pedal. I'm really excited about this thing. I'm actually just really blessed that I've got a pedal that's got my signature on it. Spent a lot of time on it, and I'm excited to get it out in the wild and see what you cats think of it. I mean, I really hope you guys end up digging the pedal. I do, but you know, kind of biased, I guess. But it should be available by the time you're watching this. It should be available, you know, through the standard, you know, Sweetwater. I think it's going to be up on REVV. I think you can get it direct with Rev. And then, of course, I'm working on my own storefront as well that will hopefully be up and running by the time this posts, and if it is, I'll make sure there's a link below to that. But I'm going to have a limited number of hand-signed pedals available through that. There'll also be, T-shirts and ball caps and coffee mugs and what have you. If you have an interest in that, please go and check that store out. And as always, I really appreciate you guys. I love all the people that have followed me all these years on my channel. It really it means a lot to me. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.